The man who finally had nothing to do. The morning came softly, the way mornings do when there is nowhere to be. He opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was pale and still, painted in a shade of white that had yellowed gently with time. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls of his bedroom, he could hear a bird calling. A simple sound, clear and pure. Then another bird answered, its voice slightly different, slightly higher. He lay there for a long moment, listening to this conversation between birds, waiting for the familiar tension to arrive. The mental list, the urgency, the invisible hand that pulled him forward into the day. But it didn't come. There was nothing scheduled today. Nothing tomorrow either. Nothing the day after that. Nothing for as far ahead as he could see. He had checked 3 times yesterday, scrolling through his calendar with increasing disbelief, refreshing his email again and again, waiting for something to appear that would give shape to these empty days. But the days stretched ahead of him, blank and open, like fields of fresh snow that no one had walked across yet. Like pages in a notebook that had never been written in. Like mornings that belonged only to themselves. At first, this had frightened him. His hands had trembled slightly as he set his phone down on the table. His breath had caught in his chest. What was he supposed to do with days that had no shape, no direction, no purpose pulling him forward? Who was he without the tasks, without the meetings, without the endless forward motion that had defined him for so long? But now, lying in bed as the light grew warmer against the wall, as the birds continued their gentle conversation outside, he felt something different stirring inside him. Not quite peace, not yet, but perhaps the very beginning of it. A small loosening in his chest, like a knot being gently untied. Like a fist that had been clenched, for years finally beginning to open. He took a breath. Slow one. He felt his lungs expand, felt his ribs move outward, felt the air move in and then out again. When had he last noticed his own breathing? Really noticed it? He rose slowly from the bed. There was no need to hurry. There was nowhere to be. No one waiting. No clock ticking toward a deadline. He sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment, feeling the weight of his body, the coolness of the floor under his bare feet. These were small things, ordinary things, but they felt new somehow, as if he were noticing them for the first time. He stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. The morning light spilled in, gentle and golden. He blinked in the brightness, letting his eyes adjust. Outside, the world was waking up slowly, just as he was. A neighbor's cat walked along a fence, placing each paw carefully, deliberately. He watched it until it disappeared behind a hedge. In the kitchen, he filled the kettle with water from the tap. The water ran clear and cold over his fingers. He stood there for a moment, feeling it, watching it cascade into the kettle. Such a simple thing. Water. But it was also a small miracle, wasn't it? Clean water, available at the turn of a handle. He set the kettle on the stove and turned the flame on low. While the water heated, he stood by the counter, doing nothing at all. Just standing. Just breathing. Just existing in the space of his own kitchen. The room was quiet except for the growing rumble of the kettle, a sound that started as a whisper and grew slowly, patiently, into something louder. He noticed the way morning light fell across the wooden table, creating a bright rectangle that would move as the day progressed, as the earth turned, as the sun made its ancient journey across the sky. He had never noticed this before, though he had lived here for years. Perhaps because he had never stood still long enough to see it. Perhaps because he had always been looking ahead, never here. The kettle began to whistle, a thin, rising note that filled the kitchen. He poured water over tea leaves in a simple white cup, watching the clear water meet the dark leaves. Slowly, slowly, the water began to change. First just a hint of color, a suggestion of amber. Then deeper, richer, turning gold, and then a deep brown gold that reminded him of autumn. Steam rose in soft curls, twisting and dispersing in the still air. He wrapped both hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into his palms, into his fingers. There was something profound about this, he thought. About having time to notice the temperature of a cup, the color of tea as it steeps, the way steam moves through air in patterns that never repeat. How many cups of tea had he made in his life? Hundreds, thousands. And how many had he truly seen? He carried his tea to the window, moving slowly, carefully, as if the tea were precious. As if this moment were precious. And perhaps it was. Perhaps every moment was. And he had simply been moving too fast to notice. The window faced east, and the morning sun was climbing slowly, degree by patient degree, turning the sky from gray to pale blue to something brighter, something that seemed to glow from within. He sat in the chair by the window, a chair he had bought years ago from a second-hand shop, a chair with worn armrests and a cushion that had molded itself to countless bodies before his, and looked out at the world. There was a tree outside, directly in his line of sight. It was bare now, its leaves long gone, its branches reaching upward toward the sky like fingers, like prayers, like hopes. He watched it for a while, noticing how even the smallest branches swayed in a breeze he couldn't feel from inside his warm room. A single leaf, brown and curled and somehow still clinging to life, refused to fall. It hung there on one of the thinnest branches, dancing slightly in the wind. He wondered how long it had been there. He wondered what kept it holding on. He wondered if it would fall today or tomorrow or next week, or if it would cling there through the entire winter. There was time to wonder about such things now. Time to sit. Time to watch. Time to notice a single leaf on a single branch on a single tree, and to find it fascinating. Minutes passed, or perhaps it was longer. Time felt different now, elastic, unmoored from schedules and clocks. His tea cooled in his hands, and he sipped it slowly, letting each sip rest on his tongue before swallowing. He tasted it fully for the first time in longer than he could remember. The slight bitterness, the earthy depth, the warmth as it moved down his throat. When had he last tasted his tea? Really tasted it? Usually it was just something to drink while doing something else. Answering emails, preparing for meetings, planning the day ahead, thinking about yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's challenges. But today there was nothing to plan. Nothing to prepare for. Nothing to answer. Reci. Just this window. Just this tree. Just this moment complete in itself. He finished his tea and set the empty cup on the windowsill with a soft clink. For a while, he simply sat there with his hands resting in his lap, feeling the weight of his own body in the chair. His shoulders, which had been tight for so long he'd forgotten what ease felt like, began to soften. Just slightly. Just enough to notice. The tension he carried there, the tension he had thought was permanent, structural, part of who he was, began to release. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But degree by degree, like ice melting in the sun. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Happy bark, playful. Then another sound. A car passing on a far street, its engine humming and then fading. Then silence again. But the silence didn't feel empty. Felt full somehow. Full of space. Full of possibility. Full of nothing at all, and that nothing felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like everything. He thought about getting up to do something. The thought came automatically. A habit worn deep by years of constant motion. Maybe he should clean the kitchen. Maybe he should organize the closet that had been chaos for months. Maybe he should make a list of projects, of tasks, of ways to fill these empty days with purpose and productivity. But the thought felt heavy, and he was so tired of heaviness. So tired of pushing. So tired of the endless should and must and need to. So he stayed in the chair. He gave himself permission to stay. Permission to do nothing. Permission to simply behere in this moment, in this body, in this life, without needing to justify his existence through productivity. The sun climbed higher degree by degree. The light in the room changed with it, softening from bright gold to a gentler glow, warmer and more diffused. Shadows shifted across the floor in slow motion, moving like dancers in a performance that would last all day. He watched them move, slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the hands on a clock when you're not looking directly at them. Like flowers opening. Like seasons changing. Time was passing, but it didn't feel urgent. It felt patient. It felt like it had nowhere else to be either. A memory surfaced, unbidden. He was a child, maybe 7 or 8, lying in the grass in his grandmother's backyard. He remembered the way the grass had felt against his bare arms, slightly itchy, slightly cool. He remembered staring up at the clouds, watching them drift across the blue sky, finding shapes in them, a dragon, a ship, a face. He remembered having nothing to do but lie there and watch and imagine. When had he lost that? When had he forgotten how to simply be? The memory faded, gentle as it had come. He didn't chase it. He let it drift away like those clouds. Around midday, though he wasn't sure of the exact time and found he didn't care, found he liked not caring. He felt hunger rising in him. Not the sharp, demanding hunger that comes from ignoring your body for too long, but a gentle reminder, quiet suggestion. His body speaking to him in the language of sensation. And for once, he was listening. He rose from the chair, his legs stiff from sitting. He stretched, feeling his spine lengthen, his muscles wake. Even this felt good. The simple act of stretching. The simple act of movement after stillness. In the kitchen, he opened the refrigerator and looked inside. The light illuminated simple provisions. There was bread, fresh from 2 days ago. Cheese, sharp cheddar. An apple red and glossy. Butter. Milk. Simple things. Ordinary things. But they seemed almost sacred in their ordinariness. He made a simple sandwich, cutting it slowly, carefully, as if it mattered how the knife moved through the bread. And perhaps it did matter. Perhaps everything matters when you're paying attention. He cut the bread into 2 triangles, the way his mother used to cut sandwiches for him when he was small. He hadn't thought about that in years. He ate standing at the counter, tasting each bite. The bread was soft and yielded easily under his teeth. The cheese was sharp and creamy, with tiny crystals that crunched slightly. The butter was smooth, rich, coating his mouth. Each flavor distinct, each texture noticed. The apple, when he bit into it afterward, was crisp and sweet, juice running down his chin. He wiped it away with the back of his hand and smiled. These were ordinary things, but they felt extraordinary in their ordinariness. How much of life, he wondered, had he rushed through without noticing? How many meals had he eaten while staring at a screen, answering messages, planning meetings? How many moments had passed while he was thinking about the next moment, and the next, never quite arriving anywhere? After eating, he washed his plate and set it in the dish rack. Then he stood there, looking at the clean plate, watching water drops catch the light and slide down its white surface. He felt no need to move on to the next thing. There was no next thing. There was only this moment, and this moment felt complete. Whole. Sufficient unto itself. He returned to the window, to the chair that was becoming familiar. The chair welcomed him back like an old friend. He sat down and looked out again at the tree, at the sky, at the world that continued its slow turning whether he was busy or still. The leaf was still there, clinging to its branch. He felt a strange kinship with it. Both of them holding on to something, both of them learning, perhaps, that it was okay to let go. That letting go wasn't falling. That letting go might, in fact, be freedom. Hours passed, unmeasured and unworried. He wasn't sure how many, and the not knowing felt like a gift. The sun moved across the sky in its ancient arc, the same arc it had traced for billions of years, the same arc it will trace for billions more. The light in the room changed with it. The bright rectangle on the table shifted, grew longer, grew softer. Its edges became less distinct. The blue of the sky deepened, became richer, took on subtle shades of violet at the edges. He watched it all happen slowly, the way everything real happens. Not in sudden jumps but in gradual shifts so subtle you can't see them until you look back and realize everything has changed. Sometimes his mind would start to spin, reaching for worry like an old friend, reaching for planning, for the familiar anxiety of things left undone. The thoughts would come. What if I'm wasting time? What if I should be doing something? What will people think? What does this mean? But he noticed the thoughts now, noticed the reaching, the grasping, and gently brought himself back. Back to the chair. Back to the window. Back to the breath moving in and out of his body without any effort from him at all. His breath had always been there, faithful and steady, even when he'd forgotten to notice it. Even when he'd been rushing, striving, pushing himself forward through days that blurred together into weeks, into months, into years. His breath had been there all along, waiting for him to come back. Patient, never judging, always present. He felt tears prick at his eyes, and he let them come. They rolled down his cheeks, warm and slow, and he didn't wipe them away. He wasn't sad. He wasn't happy. He was something else, something he didn't have a word for. Something that felt like grief and gratitude mixed together. Grief for all the years of rushing. Gratitude for this moment of stopping. Afternoon faded into evening so gradually he couldn't say when one became the other. The sky began to change in earnest now, the blue softening to pale gold, then pink, then shades of orange and coral and salmon that looked like they'd been painted by someone who understood beauty in a way that needed no words, no explanation. He watched the colors shift and blend, watched the sun sink lower, degree by degree, watched it turn the bare branches of the tree into dark silhouettes against the glowing sky, every twig and branch rendered in perfect black against the impossible colors behind it. A bird flew past, just a dark shape, wings beating steadily, purposefully. He followed it with his eyes until it disappeared beyond the roofline of a neighboring house. He wondered where it was going. He wondered if it knew, or if it simply flew because flying was what birds do. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps you didn't always need to know where you were going. Perhaps sometimes it was enough to simply be here, wings moving, air flowing, alive. Perhaps sometimes it was enough to simply be. The room grew dimmer as the sun set, shadows pooling in the corners, darkness gathering like water. He didn't turn on any lights. He sat in the gathering darkness, feeling it settle around him like a soft blanket, like a kind embrace. Outside, the street lamps flickered on, one by one, small points of warm light appearing in the dusk. First one, then another, then three more, until the whole street was lit with these small constellations. He could hear the sounds of evening now, distant voices of neighbors arriving home, a door closing somewhere, the faint music from someone's open window, the hum of the world winding down its day, settling into night. But he wasn't winding down. He was winding open. Opening to the quiet. Opening to the stillness. Opening to the strange and gentle truth that he didn't need to be doing anything at all to be worthy of this moment, this breath, this life. That his worth wasn't measured in productivity or accomplishments or how busy he kept himself. That he was enough simply as he was sitting here breathing, being. His stomach reminded him again that it existed, a gentle rumble, and he rose from the chair with a kind of reluctance. The chair had become a sanctuary, but he could return. He would return. He moved through the darkened room with slow, careful steps, his hands trailing along the wall to guide him. He turned on a single lamp in the kitchen, just enough light to see by, a small circle of warmth in the darkness. He found a can of soup in the cupboard, tomato soup, simple and familiar. He opened it with the old can opener that had been in this kitchen when he moved in, turning the handle slowly, hearing the satisfying sound of metal cutting through metal. He poured the soup into a pot and set it on the stove, turning the flame to low. He stood there watching it heat. The soup barely moved at first, then began to shiver slightly, then to move in slow, rolling currents. He stirred it slowly, the spoon moving through the red liquid, watching patterns form and dissolve. Steam rose, carrying the smell of tomatoes and something else, something that reminded him of childhood, of sick days home from school, of his mother's kitchen. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and comforting, and he realized he was smiling. Just a small smile. Quiet one. A smile for himself, for this moment, for the simple pleasure of soup warming on a stove. When the soup was hot, he poured it into a bowl, the same bowl he'd used for cereal countless mornings, the same bowl that had a small chip on the rim that his thumb always found, and carried it to the table. He sat in the chair where the rectangle of light had been that morning, though the light was gone now, replaced by the softer glow of the lamp. He ate the soup slowly, letting each spoonful warm him from the inside. The taste was simple but good. Tomatoes and cream and salt. Nothing fancy. Nothing complicated. Just soup. Just food. Just nourishment. But it felt like more than that. Felt like care. Like he was taking care of himself in the most basic, most important way. Feeding his body. Honoring his hunger. Being kind to himself. After washing his bowl, after drying it and putting it away, after wiping down the counter in slow, circular motions, he found himself drawn back to the window one last time. The night had fully arrived now. The sky was deep blue-black, the color of ink, scattered with stars that appeared one by one as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. There were so many more stars than he'd thought. He'd forgotten about stars, living in the city with its light pollution. But tonight they were there, small points off light, some bright, some dim, some he could only see if he didn't look directly at them. The tree was just a dark shape now, a black silhouette against the dark blue sky, but he could still see it, still sense its presence. The leaf was invisible in the darkness, but he knew it was still there, still holding on. Or perhaps it had fallen while he wasn't watching. Perhaps it had let go during those hours of the afternoon, and he'd missed it. Perhaps it was lying on the ground now, finally at rest. He hoped so. He hoped it had found peace in letting go. He sat in the dark room and looked out at the dark world, and felt a peace settle over him that he hadn't felt in years. Maybe decades. Maybe ever. It was the peace of having nowhere else to be. The peace of doing nothing and knowing that was enough. The peace of a day spent simply existing, simply breathing, simply watching the light change and the world turn. The peace of being nobody in particular, nowhere in particular, doing nothing in particular, and finding that this nothing was everything. Tomorrow would come with its own blank space, its own invitation to do nothing or something or anything at all. And he realized, sitting there in the dark, that he was no longer afraid of it. He was no longer afraid of the emptiness. Because it wasn't empty at all. It was full. Full of moments like this. Full of silence that spoke more clearly than words. Full of stillness that moved him more than motion ever had. Full of rest that felt like coming home after a long journey to a place he'd never left. He stayed at the window until his eyes grew heavy, until his head began to nod, until his body reminded him gently that it needed sleep. Then, moving slowly, gratefully, with a tenderness toward himself that felt new and old at the same time, had prepared for bed. He brushed his teeth, watching himself in the mirror, really seeing his face, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the face of someone who had lived and worried and tried so hard for so long. He washed his face with cool water, feeling it wake his skin. He changed into soft clothes, old pajamas that were worn thin and comfortable. Each action was deliberate, mindful, complete. Not rushed. Not done while thinking about the next thing. Just done, fully, completely, as if these simple acts were worthy of his full attention. And they were. They were. He pulled back the covers and slipped into bed, feeling the cool sheets against his skin, the weight of the blanket settling over him, the pillow cradling his head. The bed felt different tonight. Softer somehow. More welcoming. Or perhaps he was different. Perhaps he was softer, more welcoming to himself. The ceiling above him was dark now. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was there, steady and still, just as it had been that morning when he'd opened his eyes to a day of nothing. A day that had turned out to be everything. And lying there in the darkness, in the silence, in the complete and utter absence of anything he needed to do or accomplish, he felt something he hadn't felt in so long he'd almost forgotten the word for it. He felt free. Not free to do something, just free. Free from the constant pressure. Free from the endless demands. Free from the voice that always said more and faster and not enough. Free to simply be here now, in this body, in his bed, in this life. His breath slowed. His body sank deeper into the mattress, becoming heavy, becoming relaxed, becoming soft. His mind, which had been racing for so long, years of racing, decades maybe, finally began to quiet. Not because he was forcing it. Not because he was trying to meditate or practice mindfulness or do anything at all. But because it too was tired. Too needed rest. It too was ready to simply be. Outside, the world continued its patient turning. The earth spun through space at 1,000 miles an hour. Andy was spinning with it, though he couldn't feel the motion. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The moon rose, though he couldn't see it from his bed. The tree stood in the darkness, and perhaps the leaf fell, or perhaps it held on for one more night. Life continued in its patient, persistent way. Inside, he closed his eyes. And for the first time in a very long time, he had absolutely nothing to do but sleep. So he did. He slept deeply, dreamlessly, peacefully. He slept the sleep of someone who has finally stopped running. He slept the sleep of someone who has finally come home. And when morning came again, soft and gentle, with birds calling and light growing warm against the walls, Hugh would open his eyes to another day of beautiful, blessed nothing. Another day of permission to rest. Another day of simply being. And that would be enough. That would be more than enough. That would be everything. Because he was learning, slowly, gently, one moment at a time, that he didn't need to earn his rest. That he didn't need to justify his existence. That he didn't need to be productive or useful or busy to be worthy of taking up space in the world. He was learning that simply being alive was enough. that simply breathing was enough. That simply existing here now in this moment was enough. And in that knowing, in that deep, quiet knowing, he found something he'd been searching for his whole life without knowing he was searching. He found peace. He found rest. He found home. And he slept,